Some of you may or may not know Dr. Jason and Robin Fullerton. They are the pastors of Spirit Church in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. Prior to that, they served at a church in Muskogee for almost 17 years. Jason has a wide variety of ministry experience. He and I got to travel to Dublin, Ireland 2 years ago to help with speak at a pastor's conference that they were putting on for the Irish Assemblies of God. And he's just really become one of my just really close friends. He is incredibly encouraging. You're going to be encouraged tonight as you hear from him. We had him and Robin come out last year to our staff and board retreat. They did some talks with us on marriage and parenting, and it was so good, so practical, so beneficial. We wanted to find an opportunity for them to do that for our church as a whole. So tonight they're going to do two sessions for us, one on communication, one on conflict resolution. In addition to being pastors, Robin also serves as a counselor, so she has all kinds of experience in a wide variety of settings there, and I'm really looking forward to it. So Jason and Robin, if you want to make your way up. Kind of our plan for tonight, we'll do one session. It'll last about 40 minutes or so. We'll take a break, maybe 20 minutes, give you time to go out there, find some more Barbie's cookies or Sugar Llama's donuts or some other salty stuff or drinks, and then we'll come back in for session two. So our goal for tonight, pretty laid back, and just hope that it is practical and helpful for you.
Thanks, buddy. Well, so glad to be with you tonight. My wife Robin and I are privileged to be friends with Pastor Chris and Angie. And I know you guys know this, but you have amazing pastors. Like, we love your church because we love your pastors so much. And Robin told me, she said, please don't get up there and fanboy over Chris the whole time, because she knows that I could fanboy over Chris. When we were in Dublin together, we'd be walking down the streets, and I'm tall and kind of like gangly looking, and so I'm used to people like looking at me, but nobody would look at me because they were looking at the supermodel who was walking next to me thinking, is that Tom Brady that's walking down the street? And so we love you guys, and thank you so much for having us here. To be here tonight, and thank you for coming out and believing in and investing in your marriage. Pastor Chris's teaching this morning was exceptional. The only thing that I missed, because I was listening to it, is you had people raise their hands for how long they had been married. Do you mind if I just really quick recap? So 50 or more years, because I wanted to celebrate those people. That is amazing, amazing. And then we did, I think you did 40 or more. 40, wow, 30 or more. Come on, 20 or more. Woo, we're getting a lot of woo, 10 or more, 5 or more. And how would you do, like 3, less than 3, something like that? So yeah, and then any engaged folks that are in the house tonight? Anybody you're here looking for a mate, possibly? Looking for a spouse, hoping? Yeah, so we saw one hand go up. So what we wanted to do, Pastor Chris asked us just to teach on some things that would be very practical and helpful for your marriage. And some of the things that we find are the most practical and helpful are learning how to communicate better. I'm sure we all know how to communicate, but just improving our communication skills. You'll see there on your notes that 86% of marriages that fail list deficient communication as the reason why their marriage failed. So literally, if we could just teach people how to communicate better, we could help save a lot of marriages from failing. And I'm going to talk more about this in the second session tonight, but let me just give you a little secret. Satan hates your marriage. He hates everything about your marriage, and he wants to destroy your marriage, because if he can destroy your marriage, he can destroy your family. And if he can destroy your marriage, then he can destroy the witness and the impact that your marriage is intended to have. In fact, the reason that two become one, Pastor talked about that this morning, the reason two become more is because you can do more for the kingdom united than you ever could divided. And so Satan will relentlessly fight you, whether you've been married 50, 40, 30, or even just 3 years or less, he's going to fight you. And so learning to communicate and to navigate through the things of life. What I didn't put on your sheet is that 70% of Americans think that good communication is the most important factor in a happy marriage. It's not how good you look. It's not how fit your body is. It's not how much money you have. It's not how well you parent. It's good communication is the most important factor. And so we're just going to list some keys for you tonight there on your list for effective communication. The first one is priority. That's the number one key to effective communication, is priority. And it's putting priority, making your spouse feel like they are the top priority in your life. And I like to teach and show people what I call the priority pyramid. It's the most ghetto drawing I could ever make on my computer, and it's literally just a triangle, but it kind of shows here, and I might step out of the way so you can see. And, when I was in school, we learned Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and it started at the bottom with food, water, shelter, fire, and then it just worked its way on up. But in this pyramid, we actually have the inverse of that. So we start with God at the top, that everything, God is the center of everything in our life. He's the most important part of my life. And then next in priority in my life is Robin. Now, what happens is we are married, we're in love, and then all of a sudden we have children, and our children take the place of our spouse in the priority pyramid. And you don't have to nod, you don't have to point, or you don't have to say yes, but inevitably that kind of happens. Or other things, everything else takes the place of my spouse, or even takes the place of God in my life. And so something that is so crucial and so critical for us in marriage is to remember our priorities, that our priority with God has to be number one in our lives. In fact, Robin can oftentimes tell when my relationship with the Lord is a little bit out of whack. Why? Because it filters down into my relationship with her. If my relationship with God is right, my relationship with my spouse is going to be right. If my communication with God is in line, my communication with my spouse is in line. And one more thing I want to say about this is a new study that has come out that I've been reading about. And we talk about currency in the world, and the money that we spend is a currency, but one of the new currencies, and it's actually not new, but a new understanding of currency, is attention. That attention is a currency, and we decide who we're going to spend our attention on and how much attention we're going to give. And if you don't believe me, watch someone with their phone in their hand. Those reels that they're scrolling through are 90 seconds or less, because they know no one's willing to give up more than that attention, that currency, to that video or to that meme or to whatever it is that they're watching. And so priority says, I place the focus first of all on God. I place the focus second on my spouse. And this isn't just the focus. This is my time. This is my attention. These are my financial decisions. These are my relational decisions. This is like a metric that applies in every area of our lives. And that's why Jesus says you should love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, and your strength. And you should love your neighbor as yourself. Well, who is your first, your best, your closest neighbor? It's your spouse. And we oftentimes think that our neighbor maybe is our kids, or maybe really is the person who is our neighbor, or is our ministry obligations, or is our career, or all these other things. But really the first neighbor is the one that we share the house with, that we sleep hopefully in the same bed together with, that we're connected with. And so priority is so important, and priority is reflected in the way that we communicate with one another. And so I want to break down 4 types of communication for you today that we see in marriages. The first type of communication is what we call informal communications. And these are just basic communication that we have together. Informal conversations. Informal conversations. So how was your day? Or maybe you want to tell a funny story or a moment that you experienced. It's a very natural form of communication and connection. These informal conversations establish a connection between you and your spouse. It requires zero emotional vulnerability. In fact, it was funny. You may have kids like this when they would come home from school. How was your day? Fine. What'd you do? Nothing. Who were you with? Nobody. And it's like there's nothing there that we're getting from that. And so there's these informal conversations. They happen all the time. Are you ready for the weather on Tuesday? Ooh, it's really cold out there. Oh, I'm glad. There's not a lot of substance to it, but they happen. They're easy, they're natural. Then we get into the second type of communication in marriage, is what we call administrative meetings. Administrative meetings. And you laugh, but they happen in every marriage. And they have to happen in every marriage, or everything will fall apart. They're usually initiated by the wife. It's only funny because it's true, but it's like, can you pick up the dry cleaning? Who's picking up the kids? When our son was like a month or less old, we went to visit my grandmother. We lived in the middle of the Metroplex, and she lived in Fort Worth. And we got to my grandmother's house, and you have to understand my granny. It's like, if you show up at my house, you don't leave, you're going to stay, you're going to eat, you're going to, all the things. And we got to Granny's house, and we forgot the diaper bag, because we didn't have an administrative meeting about it in the first place to discuss whose responsibility it was to have the diaper bag and who.
Following that, we had a challenge meeting, which is going to be our next one, where we address challenges, because it was one of the it was one of our first real bad ones.
And before we go to challenges, let me add some stuff and then we'll get there. So not everything in life has to be an administrative meeting, but there do have to be administrative meetings that take place. For instance, I should probably not make social plans unless I run it through Robin's social calendar first. Anybody else relate to that? And then let me answer, and you can just you can answer this out loud or maybe look at your spouse and say the number. But what is the amount of money that you can spend without first asking your spouse? Like how much? 500? Wow. $13,000. Wow. Wow. How long y'all been married? 6 years. That's awesome. So these have to happen, right? Because we do this in our marriage. We know, like, our default number is 100. Obviously, if Robin wants to spend more than 100, she doesn't have to call me. If I want to spend more than 100, I definitely have to call her. But your marriage needs these administrative meetings because otherwise things fall apart. But sometimes, as Robin was alluding to, the third type of communication in marriage can lead to a challenge. We call them just the challenging conversations because not everything in life, despite what social media and the world tells us, not everything in life can be fixed in 30 minutes or with even a hashtag. In fact, 1 Corinthians 7, verse 28 is super encouraging. It says, "Those who get married will have troubles." A single man named Paul wrote that, so take that with a grain of salt, but he did say those who get married will have troubles. Here's what we have learned and what we have seen is that when we have these deeper conversations, oftentimes these tough subjects that need to be tackled, like when our spouse has hurt us or disappointed us, when we disagreed about something critical, our kids are really good about doing this to us. So there was one time that we were sitting at a dance recital because I'm a dance dad, and Robin was here, and Ryan was here, and I was here, and our daughter was backstage getting ready. And Ryan was playing this super cool Air Force game on his phone. And so Robin looks at him and says,
Hey, you need to put that up. That's rude. We don't do that here.
While simultaneously I said, hey, when you're done, can I try that? And he looked at us and he was like, I'm so confused. I don't know who to listen to. And I was like, well, always mom, obviously. Yes, that's what I meant was later on, can I try the game? Not obviously during the dance recital because we have to be on the same page. And so we have to be able to have those challenging conversations. There might be times in your life when you're dealing with sickness or a chronic pain. We just found out that my in-laws are going to move to Bartlesville. I saw that look that Chris just gave me, and I love my in-laws, so it's not even a bad thing. It's amazing. But we've had to have those deep conversations about that. What's it actually going to look like if Robin's parents move to Bartlesville? Because these conversations help us grow. And let me give you the fourth type of conversation. It's life-giving conversations. So the fourth type of communication is what we call life-giving conversations. They're about getting to know your partner better. They strengthen the bonds that you have between you. They can be playful and affirming. Like yesterday, we were having a conversation about who was your favorite teacher growing up. Do you remember any of your favorite teachers growing up? I can remember a couple. Robin started at kindergarten and named every single teacher she ever had in her life. Anybody else that I'm seeing some people out there. Anybody that you're like, I can kind of remember their face, and I think I was in math, but that was me. And so there was just a life-giving conversation. We've been married for 22 wonderful years. Wonderful years.
Total. But we had a daughter with colic. And if any of y'all had ever had a kid with colic, you know that there's a few months in there that it's not the best in the whole world. So.
Yeah, so
should I try this? Yeah, I'm on now.
Yeah.
So anyway,
22 wonderful.
Yeah. 22 wonderful, 23 total.
Yeah. Because there was that 1 year. But we're still growing. We're still learning. I still want to explore and discover who my wife is. I want to express gratitude and demonstrate curiosity. I want to ask her questions that I've never asked her before. I want to know more about her hopes and her dreams because she's not the same woman that she was when I married her, and I'm not the same man that I was when she married me. There was a study that was done. They studied 400 couples over a span of 30 years. This is like an in-depth research that was done. And they said that happy couples spend about 10 minutes each day talking about meaningful things. Now, let me define meaningful. Anybody go out for a Valentine's date? Nobody went out. Okay, we need to preach on going out for Valentine's Day. On our Valentine's date, we spent the first at least 30 minutes talking about church and ministry before Robin had to say, can we talk about anything other than the church and ministry? And I know not everybody in the room is in ministry, but sometimes we need to talk about things other than, did you remember the dry cleaning, or the stuff that our kids are going through, or the challenges that we face, or what happened at work. We just need to dig deep into one another and talk about those favorite vacations, or things that we haven't done, or dreams that God has placed in our heart. We need to explore and get to know one another. We need to focus on the things that are down deep in our hearts, the things that expand our understanding of our mate. And when we're having these conversations, we're speaking life into our spouses. Proverbs chapter 18 says this: the tongue has the power of life and death. And so if my tongue has the power to speak life or speak death into my spouse, I want to always be speaking life into her. There will be enough things in this world that will try to speak death into our marriage and into us individually, and I want to be the one who is always speaking life. In just a second, we're going to give you a chance to dialogue about this as a couple, but let me go back through them. The informal conversations, the administrative conversations, the challenging conversations, and the life-giving conversations. So if your conversations between you and your spouse are always informal, you don't have a spouse, you have a roommate. If the conversations are always administrative, you don't have a spouse, you have a coworker. If your conversations are always challenging, you're not married, you have a mother-in-law. That went over better than I thought it would. If your conversations are always life-giving, you're married to the Hallmark Channel. Because it can't always be all this or all that. There is a healthy balance in these types of conversations.
Yeah, and that balance really looks different for every couple. We can't say you're supposed to have a certain percentage. But really quick, we want to take a minute. It's as if you were in a counseling office. So we're just going to stop for a second and give you homework between the two of you, except we're going to do it here. And so I want you to put on your sheet, without consulting with each other, what percentage of each one of those do you feel like your relationship has? What percentage of the informal, of the administrative, of the challenging, and of the life-giving? And then when you've done that, compare numbers with your spouse and talk about that. Say, is this the way that we want it to be? Where can we have more life-giving conversations? Where do we need more administrative conversations? So we'll give you a couple of minutes to work on that.
We're going to give you about 60 seconds to finish answering those questions real quick because you're having that conversation right there. About 60 more seconds. All right, I want to kind of put a bow on this. Again, we talked about the number one key to communication is priority. And here's what priority does. Priority says to our spouse, I want to do more than just hear that you're speaking words. I want to understand who you are. I want to get to know you better. I want to understand how your mind works and how you think. I want to continue growing in the depth of our relationship. Let me give you the second key for effective communication, and it's just simply the word listening. Listening is such a vital part of communication across the board, but especially in our marriages. We need to learn to be a good listener. And when we think about our educational upbringing, almost all of us took classes on reading, almost all of us took classes on writing, almost all of us took classes like a public speaking type of class, but very few of us have had any kind of training on listening. This is not something that we are taught to do. And James chapter 1 and verse 19 says this, you must all be quick to listen and slow to speak and slow to get angry. I've found sometimes in my life I am so fast to speak and I am so slow to listen. And so this is a skill that we're all working on in our lives. In Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he said the biggest problem in communication is that we do not listen to understand, we listen to reply. And I don't know if you're like me at all. I'm just being transparent and vulnerable this evening with you. But a lot of times before the question has even been finished, I've already answered it in my mind, and I'm just waiting for the person to stop speaking so that I can rebuttal whatever the question was. And I have to learn to slow not only my mouth, but I have to learn to slow my mind down so that I'm really tuning in to what's being said. And I'm listening not just to the question, but I'm listening to the perspective of my wife as she's asking me the question. Proverbs chapter 18 and verse 13 says it this way, if one gives an answer before he hears, it is his folly and his shame. I'll read it again. If one gives an answer before he hears, it is his folly and his shame. And when we were studying this, Robin noted that it doesn't say if she gives an answer before she hears. It's always written for the male pronoun that is there because it falls on us. So let's talk about some types of listening. Let me give you 3 types of listening. The first is inactive listening. Inactive listening. It means you're hearing through your own bias. It means you're not open-minded when you're being asked a question. Your mouth might utter, I'm listening, but your body shows that you are not paying attention. Inactive listening often listens only to criticize, or it waits for the wrong phrase to be uttered. And I'm not here to create negativity, and I'm not here to stir up any feelings that you might have. I just want to expose there is a real element of our communication that is inactive listening. We do it all the time. We never do it during preaching, right? Let me try again. We never do it when Pastor Chris is preaching, right? Okay, good. Because he's my favorite preacher, and you can ask anybody. It's just a real quick one. When I leave the church, the first thing I do is go to YouTube and go to Christian Chapel so I can hear what Pastor Chris preached that week. I love Pastor Chris. He's a great preacher. The second type of listening is active listening. So there's inactive, but then there's active listening. And active listening is when I'm listening, but I'm also analyzing and evaluating so that I can truly hear what my spouse is saying to me. In active listening, there is a physical demonstration that I'm present in the moment. It shows that I'm paying attention. I'm not just listening and demonstrating that I'm paying attention. I'm asking insightful questions. I'm trying to eliminate my misunderstanding. I'm even reiterating maybe what has been said to me so that Robin can tell he's with me in this moment. He's hearing what I'm saying. It's not just undivided attention to the message I want to hear. It's undivided attention to the message that is truly being communicated to me. And that requires vulnerability, right? That requires trust. But intimacy requires vulnerability and trust. And so we have to learn to be active listeners. But can I take it just one step further for you? The third type is empathetic, not pathetic, empathetic listening. And empathetic listening is like active listening, but on steroids. So the place where I get my truck washed, they have this one package that's like, I don't know, whatever it is. And then for like $3 or $4 more, you can get that package, but like more on top of it. And that's kind of what empathetic listening, it's active listening, but it adds the empathy. And what do we mean by the word empathy? It's identifying with an understanding of another person's situations or feelings or motives. It's saying, I'm not just hearing, I'm not just being still until I have to give a response. I am truly tuning in and honing into what your heart is saying I'm trying to put myself inside of your shoes. I'm trying to see through your eyes, like literally put on a different set of lenses so that I can not just hear the words you're saying, but I can understand what your spirit is trying to communicate. And Pastor Chris said it this morning, the two are becoming one flesh. And that's not just a sexual union. That's not just a relational union. That involves whole life intimacy of our emotions, our intellect in all aspects. And that's really the goal of empathetic listening, is try to see from our spouse's perspective and try to put ourselves in their shoes. In fact, we've got a special video that we brought with us to kind of demonstrate what empathetic listening looks like. So watch this video.
It's just, there's all this pressure, you know? And sometimes it feels like it's right up on me. And I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head. And it's relentless. And I don't know if it's going to stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever going to stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there...
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing...
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
No, see, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See,
out.
you're not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just, sometimes it's like there's this achy, I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
That sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
Come on, if you would just...
Don't.
Try to see things my way. Do I have...
Empathetic listening, right? And so powerful. What's your favorite line from that clip?
My sweaters are snagged. I can't even. I've seen this so many times, and it just makes me laugh. Oh, it's great. Okay, so here is our next assignment for you. Between the two of you, and once again, these assignments are something that normally you would have like a week to complete if you were sitting across from me in my office. So we encourage you to take these home, continue these conversations. If there's something that you feel like you really want to dig deep in and just sit with for a while, do that. That's the whole reason. We're just kind of introducing this to you so you can have these follow-up conversations. But the one about communication, the first question that you're going to ask each other, what are things I do that show you I'm listening? So this is focusing on the positive. This is your chance to really celebrate your spouse, celebrate the things that they do that show you that they're listening to you. And then the second question to that is, what can I do to be a better listener? So those two questions, take a couple minutes and talk to your spouse about those two areas.
All right, we're going to give you about another 60 seconds. Lots of good conversation. Keep going, about 60 more seconds.
Okay, we're going to wrap that part of it up. I wanted to remind you when you're talking about our first question, what are things I do that show you that I'm listening, where you're focusing in on the positive things? If you have a place on your sheet, this is one of the most important things that I tell couples when they come into my office. What's rewarded is repeated. And so when you are focusing on what your spouse is doing right, you're going to get a whole lot more of that behavior than if you come in and you're just focused on everything your spouse is doing wrong. Your spouse is not trying to do things, well, in most cases, your spouse is not trying to do things to annoy you. They're just not sure, I don't know exactly how Jason feels all the time. Jason doesn't know how I feel all the time. But if he does something that really, really makes me feel like, man, he gets me, he's listening to me, or if he does something that, like, maybe I need, my love language is acts of service. And if he comes in and does something without me even asking him to, and I reward that just by the way that I say that to him, like, man, his love language is words of affirmation. So if I use his love language to say, that really meant a lot to me, he's going to keep doing that. So just remember that. What's rewarded is repeated.
My other love language is physical touch. So if she puts her hand on my shoulder while she's giving me a word of affirmation, you better believe that trash is getting taken out, that dishwasher's getting loaded. It's going to keep happening in our house because what is rewarded is repeated. And let me just add one more thing. What are some things that I can do to show you that I'm listening? I remember when our son was little and we were trying to get him to pay attention, we would say, you need to look at us. And he would be like, to make sure that we knew that his eyes were glued on us. But I found as a guy, one of the most important things that I can do is my remote control has this thing called a pause button. Wow, whoever invented that is awesome. But if I will pause whatever sporting event I'm watching or whatever is so important at the moment and set that down and just physically turn towards Robin, it speaks so much of you have my attention in this moment. I'm no longer distracted by this or engaged in that. And it really just is, at least I think it sends the right message. Most of the time it sends the right message. And talking about sending the right messages, that leads us to our third key for effective communication. And it's just simply the word tone. T-O-N-E. Tone is so important. The way we say things is oftentimes more important than just how we say it. So we're going to kind of play back and forth off of each other for a second. We're just going to use some really common phrases, but we're going to use them with different tone. Okay? So the first phrase we're going to use is just, I don't care. Have you ever said, I don't care? And so a lot of times I'm like, I don't care.
I don't care.
I think she really does care. Right? Anybody ever got that one before? I'm the only one. Oh, this is therapeutic for me, maybe today. Yes!
Yes.
Okay. No.
No.
It's communicating there. Oh, this is one of my favorites. It's up to you. See, why are you already laughing at that?
It's up to you. I'm saying the woman version of it, by the way.
Can we talk about this later?
Can we talk about this later?
I love you, babe. I know we'll work this out, and we have all the tools to get through this. And the reason this is funny is because when our child, our firstborn, was 5 days old, and it was 3 a.m, and he hadn't slept for like 48 straight hours, we were trying to figure out what to do, and we had no clue. I leaned over to Robin in the middle of the night, and I said, I love you, babe. I know we'll work this out. We're going to get through this together. And Robin said,
take your hands off of me.
That's the honest truth, what she said to me in that moment. Like, don't ever touch me again. So tone is so important. In fact, I want to show you another video that we have that illustrates how powerful tone can be. Let's watch this.
Fun. If I gave you some lines. Now, these are not lines that you would not classify these lines as your typical, like, kind of angry guy lines. In fact, they're quite the opposite of that.
Okay.
And I'll read them to you, and if you act them back to me in your own inimitable way, okay?
Okay.
You want to do that?
Here we go.
All right, say these as angrily as you can. Lavender body wash makes my pores tingle.
Lavender body wash make my pores tingle.
Here's another one for you. I want a love like the love in the Notebook, a love that splits the sky.
I want a love like the love in the Notebook, the one that split the sky, man. Split the sky.
This is wonderful. And this is great for young actors as well. It's an exercise. All right, one more. You ready?
Let's do it.
OMG, did you do something new with your hair? I love it.
OMG! Did you do something with your hair? I love it. Love it.
Okay, so we can say a lot of words, but the tone can communicate more than just the meaning of the word ever could. And so I want to talk to us a little bit about our voice, our inflection, the nonverbal things that we need to be aware of while we are communicating to each other. So I'm going to give you some types of nonverbal communication. The first one is our facial expressions. The human face is extremely expressive and has many facial expressions, and not all facial expressions are the same across all cultures, just as not all hand gestures are the same across all cultures. And there's certain things that are appropriate for us to do here that are not appropriate for us to do in other parts of the world. And I'm not going to demonstrate any of those for you today, but I think it's important when we're having conversation that we are so mindful of the expression that is on our face. Have you ever thought about, like, maybe if we could have a mirror while we're talking to each other just to see what we look like? Because now our spouse isn't hearing the words, they're just trying to read the expression of our face. You've done that, haven't you? Yeah, and you think, oh, is that wrong? Did you not like that? Or are you with me on that? And so we have to be so mindful of our facial expressions. The second is body movement and posture. Body movement and posture is so important when we communicate, especially with our spouse. The way that we sit, the way we walk, the way we hold our head, our posture, our movements make overt and subtle comments to those around us. So we have to be careful about how we're sitting. And you can demonstrate so many things just when you're sitting in the chair, and if you're leaning into that conversation and you're engaged, it shows that you want to be there and you want to be a part. And we all know this. Like, I'm not teaching you something new tonight or something revolutionary. It's just the awareness of it. It's just being mindful. Oh man, am I just kind of, I don't want to fall out of this chair in front of Christelle, but what am I showing in this conversation? Like, what am I demonstrating? What message am I sending? Did you catch that part? What message am I sending just with my posture and my body movement? The next is gestures. Gestures like a thumbs up, a wave, a point, using our hands when we're speaking and during conflict. One of the big ones is, like, what do we do with our hands during conflict? What are we communicating if we're like this? What are we communicating? Like that, head, shoulders, knees, and toes. And, where do we put our hand? I mean, it's a big deal. Even as a preacher, would we speak like this? Do you put your hands in your pocket to look relaxed? We're always sending messages, both verbal and nonverbal. And sometimes just in the conversation, when we're having that, if I've got a good connection with Robin, and there's just even a slight gesture from my hand that's just showing, man, I'm tuned in, I'm dialed into what you say, I'm here in this moment, I want to hear your heart. And then this fourth one is massive. This might be the most important one. It's eye contact. It's eye contact. It's absolutely huge. It communicates all of our thoughts and our emotions. It can sometimes show hostility. It can also show attraction and affection. It supports conversation. It helps communicate interest, but eye contact is vital.
Yeah, it is. And that goes back to priority in the moment. When your kids are all around you and they're just going crazy, and for you to be able to look at your husband and as they're talking, go like this and look them in the eye, that's a huge indicator of priority, not only to him, but your kids need to see that also, because your kids are going to be vying for your attention. And it is massive if you can say to them, hey, Daddy's talking and he's the priority right now because he's speaking to me. And it's okay for them not to be the priority in that moment. And in fact, it's healthy for them to know that this is the priority first and they come after that. It's really hard to teach them that later in life And, I've had some friends that have had to teach their kids that when their kids were in junior high or in high school, when their marriage is falling apart, because all they've done is made that contact in in so many different ways, but made that priority out of whack. So just the basic thing of eye contact while your spouse is talking is a really big deal.
And this isn't on your sheet, but playing off of eye contact is just simply being present in the moment with your spouse. Man, there are so many things that want our attention all the time, like simultaneously want our time. And when we can demonstrate, I am present with you in this moment, that can be through eye contact, that can be through the gestures that we're giving, that can be through the posture, the expression on our face. Number 5 is touch. That's a big one for me. Just found out about that a minute ago. But just that hug, that warm embrace, the touch on the shoulder, holding hands, maybe a caress on the knee, a pat on the back. You're sending a message without even sending words. But it's so important because I'm engaging with you and I am present in this moment. And something that probably Pastor Chris could talk about better than I could is, especially for those of us who are in ministry, but realistically, for all of us who are a part of the body of Christ, the ministry of presence cannot be overstated. Sometimes we think it's all about the words we're going to say, and we don't realize how the Holy Spirit just uses us through the ministry of presence, just being here in that moment. There are times when we can just sit and be together in the car and drive and not have any noise, any interaction, but we're so present with one another in that moment. I think part of that's because the rest of our life is so filled with interactions and musics and conversation, and not musics, but music and conversation and all those things, that the ministry of present, just being present with one another, being real, being vulnerable, being open. And then let me give you the last one, number 6. Did I give you touch? Did I give you that? Okay. Number 6 is space. Space is important. Have you ever had somebody get in your bubble? You're afraid to mention it, aren't you? We don't like it when people in our bubble. Be respectful of one another's bubbles, but also have a bubble that's just for you and your spouse that other people can't get in. Because a lot of times we think, oh, well, I'm just befriending them. I'm being kind, so I'm going to incorporate them into my bubble. Actually, they're not supposed to be in your bubble. The priority pyramid where we started, my relationship with God is first. My relationship with Robin is second. And nobody else gets in that space. And my kids don't get in that space. And here's what they're going to say. When they see that chart, if you go home and tell your kids that I showed you this chart today, and they see that God is first and mom or dad is second, you know what they're going to say? That's not fair. They're going to say, that's not fair. But you know what's going to happen? Is they're going to marry somebody, and they're going to leave your house, and do you know where you go to on their chart? 4, to the bottom. To the everything else list on their chart. That's really not fair, right? And so, but it's, again, what Robin said, we are modeling and teaching godly priority to our kids. We're helping them to understand how to be married. We're living that out. I mean, that's what God intends for our marriage, is that we are a reflection of Christ's relationship with his church. And one of the ways that we do that is through the way that we communicate, the priority and the tone and the listening skills that we have. And so we want to give you an opportunity to discuss this as well.
Yeah, so our next practical application of that, our next question that you're going to discuss with your spouse is, what are some specific ways we can improve our nonverbal communication? And remember, you can add in there, remember, what's rewarded is repeated. So you can also have that conversation, what do you do really well that lets me know you're listening? But then focus in on what are some ways that I can improve the way that I communicate with Jason, and that Jason can improve the way he communicates with me. I'll give you a couple minutes.
We're going to give you about 60 seconds to finish that up. Keep that good conversation going, about 60 more seconds. All right. Well, appreciate you having these dialogues right here with your spouse. And again, we want this to just be the springboard. What we found in doing these oftentimes is that if we don't ask the question right now, then the conversation in the door has never been opened for it. And I know that as soon as this is over, you're going to get donuts from Sugar Llama or cookies, or even at the end of the night, you're going to pick up your kids or your students, you're going to head home, you're going to worry about the impending snowstorm, all the things that are happening. So we just want to kind of get all the conversation going, because there's so much that God is trying to do. Again, the enemy wants to fight against your marriage. He wants to destroy your marriage. We're going to talk about conflict in the next session, but almost any conflict that we're going to come up against in marriage, we can overcome with effective communication. So starting with just that baseline of improving our communication skills is so very vital. Thanks for letting us be with you tonight. Let me pray over you before Pastor Chris comes to give us some instructions. Lord, thank you for these couples who truly love you and who are kingdom-minded, who want to invest and grow their marriage, whether they've been married for over 60 years or whether they're just new to marriage. We believe you have a beautiful story for their life, and we believe you're doing something special in and through them. I pray that you would help all of us to become better at communicating in marriage, to learn to not only speak, but to learn how to listen, and to learn priority, and to learn what our tone communicates and how we can improve all those areas of communication and so many other areas, so that we can hear the heart of our spouse. We can love one another more fully. Ultimately, we can love you completely with all of our heart, all of our soul, all of our mind, and our strength. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen.